Okay, welcome to Into the Channel, a podcast primarily about women's football. Before we hit the pitch, if you enjoy the show or love women's football as much as your boys do, come kick it with us already. Subscribe, follow YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you like to watch or listen. Leave us a review over your favorite podcast app. Links to all of our socials in the show notes of this episode. I am your host, Dino DeCespedes, and as always, I am joined by my co-host, Mr. Grant Engel. What is up, man?
I'm feeling pretty good, buddy. We had some football. We had some international football
That we did.
to digest over the weekend, and I thought it was pretty enjoyable.
Enjoyable is a great word for it. You know, there's sometimes the 0-0 draw gets a little bit of a bad rap, but I thought there was a lot to look out for. We didn't learn a whole lot, but I think we learned little nuggets here and there that we picked up. I'm interested to hear what you saw, and I kind of want to get a little temperature check from you on what I saw. So as mentioned, USA England went down at Wembley. Mr. Grant Engel, where do you want to get started?
Well, let's start there. I think, when we saw the squads for each of these teams selected earlier, we knew there were going to be some players missing, and deservedly so. Like we mentioned, as soon as the rosters were announced, Mallory Swanson, Sophie Smith, and Trinity Rodman, they deserve a break. Mm-hmm. So it's time to kind of look at some other players, look at some other options that you might have in those forward positions. And then on England's side, no Lauren James because of injury, no Lauren Hemp because of injury. Those are two glaring losses for England's side. So yeah, are we going at this, kind of missing a few players on each side? Yes, but I felt like the star power was still there.
Star power was awesome. I think like when the ball kicks off, there was like a nice haze, at Wembley, probably had some nice fireworks going that left a nice misting, that just kind of, gave it like a little wintry, spooky kind of feel. And then you just look at the lineups. I think the thing that stuck out to me early was the matchups. I think we got some extremely tasty matchups. You look at Beth Mead, Emily Fox, a couple Arsenal teammates kind of going at it. Georgia Stanway had some some gnarly fouls on Horan early. I think she took that matchup personal. Lindsay Horan, Kira Walsh, just meeting of the minds in the center of the park. That was great. You had like the young Emma Sears on the right going to Alex Greenwood. I think my favorite, though, was on the left, you had Alyssa Thompson going at the vet, Lucy Bronze. That was a great chess match in and of itself. You had, Alyssa trying to use some of her athleticism, physicality. Lucy Bronze obviously brings max level football IQ. And it was a great battle because it kind of went back and forth there.
Yeah, I thought it was a great battle. I thought when those two were matching up, Thompson and Bronze, it was kind of like lean forward time a little bit to be like, okay, what exactly is this going to look like? We know what time it is with Lucy Bronze. She's an all-time great. But to see Alyssa Thompson, who came in a hyped player coming into the 2023 World Cup, didn't quite live up to it, started to round into really good form in the NWSL season. So you kind of wanted to see what that looked like. But you mentioned two words real quick before we get too far into this podcast. Tasty matchups. And then you also mentioned a haze coming over the field. My man, I have a beverage here that people could describe as tasty or with a bit of a haze in it. I'm going to crack that in honor of this matchup.
I like it. I'm going to join you.
There you go. I had a feeling you'd be there.
0-0. There were no losers, so we're going to celebrate that.
There you go.
Cheers to you.
Cheers to you. But yeah, I think the matchups were good. I mean, the midfield especially, and I think DeMarcus Beasley touched on it in the post-match too, and when he talked to Lindsay Horan. I mean, Kira Walsh, Georgia Stanway, Jess Park on one side, Lindsay Horan, Sam Coffey, Rose Lavelle on the other side. That's a group of 6 midfielders that really, I mean, unless you're talking about like Spain's midfield, maybe Germany's midfield, we're talking about 2 of the absolute elite groups of midfielders in the world.
Absolutely, yeah. You look at that matchup as well. It was like sort of like a tag team, like Lavelle Horan against Walsh and Stanway was like incredibly engaging. I walked away from this one. Talk about takes. Rose Lavelle still has her entire bag.
Yep.
I mean, we spent a lot of time, and I feel so dumb. I raised my hand as high as I could possibly raise it figuratively. We talked a lot about Rose Lavelle. It was like her injuries, she's getting older, etc. She looked not only like the best player at a bunch of spots in the match, athletically, physically, super fluid. Her movements, she looked great. She had that kind of like that preseason sheen, to her game, just like moving kind of wherever she wanted. And I think her touch was there. I think, her vision was there. I mean, she had a great game. And I think we spent a lot of time talking about, that number 10 role and like the U.S. midfield more generally. I think Rose Lavelle was like, all right, everybody's got to chill a little bit because like there's no discussion about next year or 2027 that doesn't have me included.
Yeah, I mean, she's 29 years old. She was really in that, I want to say, and please, pals, correct me if I'm wrong in the chat, but it felt like that 2022 and 2023 season. And obviously I saw some of that in Seattle with her one season with the Reign. She was really laboring through, it seemed like, nagging injuries for a while. So I don't think we were totally off base in wondering, can this 29-year-old central midfielder, is she going to be around for the 2027 World Cup? It seems like she has found something with some more time to heal because she was taking some of that time off. We talked about it in the Olympics too. Even on that tight schedule, she was coming out and looking great in pretty much all of her minutes in the Olympics. It seems like she has regained some of that and has planted herself firmly in the central midfielder conversation for the States. And I raised my hand along with you. I think we did like a full 15 minutes talking about midfielders and didn't say her name and then had to come back the next episode and be like, oh yeah, by the way, this superlative player who helped us win the 2019 World Cup, she's in the mix too.
Absolutely. Yeah. And shout out to the couple of folks, don't have your name on hand, but you know who you are, who kind of gave it to us in the comments. Like, all right, guys, come on.
Yeah.
Totally but I think, the injury point is a good one. I think the 2023 World Cup is another good one. I mean, the showing was so poor offensively. I mean, I'm just speak for myself. I just kind of looked at the whole roster. I was like, all of this has to get rethought. All of this has, not that we have to kind of totally clean house roster wise, but this needs to get reset from the top down. That ends up being what happened. And we definitely shouldn't be surprised that a few of those players are going to make it through that transition, even though like organizationally, we've already seen major overhauls pretty much from the top down. So, lesson learned, from a young podcaster. Shout out to Rose. You already know what time it is. Legend. But what was your main takeaway from watching these two teams go at it in the first half?
I tweeted it from the Into the Channel account. It was just one of those halves where there were a couple moments there where England was able to get on the ball, hold the ball, get into the attacking third, but then never really come away with any shots that felt overly threatening. And you see this so many times with the great teams. And I think, call me biased, I think England is a great team themselves. But when they go into the dressing room 0-0, and you could be like, okay, England played them really close. I was just kind of left shrugging my shoulders going, how close is it really if you never have a good look on goal? And Mary Earps on our side, on England's side, had to make a couple key saves. Like, to me, it definitely didn't feel as close as it looked, if that made sense.
That's interesting because I think the U.S. definitely won the first half.
Yep.
Looked like the better side, had the better chances.
Yep.
But a little bit listless offensively as well. Like when you think about the early chance, the Emirsier's cross that finds Alyssa Thompson, it's kind of one of those connections where it's like it goes all the way from the right side, crosses a bunch of bodies, gets all the way to the left. Thompson's kind of running in, back right, with the ball. So kind of like a sequence that you don't really see too often.
Yeah.
And maybe kind of caught England a little bit off guard. I thought defensively, England looked really good, except early when Leah Williamson was, not quite up to speed, let's say for the first 20, 25 minutes. I think she got off to a slow start. But I also left the first half from a U.S. perspective a little bit underwhelmed. And obviously no triple espresso. So, the bite to the offense kind of lacking. But I kind of wish I did see a little bit more creativity or diversity in the attack. But it just kind of seemed almost like a sparring session where it's just like, all right, we're just kind of working up a sweat in this first half.
Yeah.
We're going to save our stuff for a little bit later in the match.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it. I think you're right about Leah Williamson. We've talked about it in the Champions League a little bit. I know obviously she's one of your gunners. We've seen it a little bit in the WSL. She has had some moments that have been pretty tough. And, she's a good player. She's the captain. She has the respect of her teammates. There have just been some times where it's like, ooh, she can be had in the middle of the field. And I felt like Jess Carter and Alex Greenwood, and obviously like Lucy Bronze in Sharpie, double underline, don't even think about it. Don't even worry about it. Mm-hmm. But like I thought Alex Greenwood, Jess Carter, Lucy Bronze, I felt like those three really kind of provided some cover for Williamson in a couple spots to kind of make those chances for the USA a little more difficult than they otherwise would have been.
Yeah, for sure. And I thought Williamson warmed up
Yeah.
as the match went on and had a couple key stops, later, definitely in the second half.
Yes.
Was somebody that you could pick on a little bit less for sure. But defensively, I thought England looked great. Switching gears to the US, though, that US defense also looked pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Before I get there, though, there was one key matchup that I thought was really illuminating. I talked at the top about the 1v1 matchups that were really interesting to watch. The one where I thought the US had a big time advantage. Actually, before I get to that, my big takeaway matchup wise was there really was no massively discernible difference in talent. Pretty much any two pairings of players that you looked at, talent wise, I think things were pretty even, except for one spot. I thought Jess Park kind of really struggled up the central channel at Emily Sonnet and Naomi Girma. That was just not going to work. Obviously, and those are two elite players that she's trying to go at. But I thought talent-wise, the matchups were really great. You just kind of stack up 11 versus 11 and kind of any pairing of the two. It was like, okay, here we go. Let's see what this matchup looks like.
Yeah, it's specifically on Jess Park versus Girma. That's probably a tough matchup for anybody going up against Girma. In the center of the field, when you have that trio of Sonnet, Girma, Coffee, it's a lot of intelligence. One thing that strikes me more and more as I watch more and more of Naomi Girma play, teams are even a little, at least from what I can tell, even a little afraid to press her. Like, they lay off her a little bit to try to limit her passing channels because you're not going to put real pressure on her when you run up on her. She's going to be completely calm. She'll play it back to the keeper, and you might be exposing other passing lanes on that. So, I mean, I think people respect her intelligence. There was one moment where Park is like streaking down the right-hand side and Girma's on her. So she resets, plays a ball back. I can't remember who she played it back to. It might have been Russo, but she plays it back and then immediately spins for another run for a give and go. And then she's able to kind of get the ball on toward goal. I thought that was really smart by Jess Park, because if you want to try to get away from like a superlative defender like that, you got to give and go your way away from them. So I thought that was good, but Girma just continues to be the backbone of a dominating defense. When you have those central three, especially when you play Sana back there, we've seen Davidson play that role. You and I think, firmly believe Emily Sams could play that role. Plus Coffee, you just kind of rule out taking the ball through the central channels like you were talking about. I mean, I understand Swanson, Smith, and Rodman are incredible and they're goal scorers and the goals make the highlights. I just think I think we could probably safely say the best center back in the world. That becomes central, no pun intended, to your identity as a football team. You can't get away from that. Like, she dictates everything that happens up and beyond her, and everything that's happening up and beyond her is the entire field.
Yeah, they talked about in the telecast, Wildman and Julie Foudy, about Kira Walsh on the other side, sort of like dictating the offense for England. And I agree with you. I think Girma plays that role for the US. And I think we're starting to see Emma Hayes' philosophy a little bit. Obviously, like, no Nish Vangar on the left. She's replaced by Casey Kruger. Shout out to our guy, Bicey. And Emily Fox, she took her opportunities to kind of get upfield. But I do feel like she was sitting back just a little bit more to kind of firm up things defensively. I think we're kind of used to seeing Niswanger like way upfield and like sort of like the defense kind of shaded all the way around that way. Like the shell just kind of rotated. Yep. But I agree with you, Coffee, and maybe it's a function of the competition, but Coffee sitting back, really harassing. Kruger back there, really playing great defense. Sonnet, you already know what time it is. And then Fox, I think like 10% less of an offensive upfield, type strategy for the match.
Yeah.
You really made it difficult. Alessia Russo, you barely heard her name until we got to like the second half.
Yeah.
Jessica Naz on the right. She also had a slow start, came on a little bit later in the match for sure. And then the Beth Mead, Emily Fox matchup was just such a great 1v1 with Fox probably getting the better of her, but Mead definitely had her moments. I think all the way throughout the match, she was probably one of England's more consistent players on the day.
Yeah, I mean, that's typical Beth Mead. She puts on the England shirt and she's pretty much always great. It left me wondering, I tend to do this and I love to do this. In my notes, I put in probably around like the 40th minute. And I will say, just again, to raise my hand on this, in my older age, I have become less emotional about sports and sports teams in general. But when I watch the England's men's national team and England's women's national team, I don't know, they still bring it out of me a little bit. But around the 40th minute, I just jotted down in my notes, you got to take out Nas and put in Aggie Beaver Jones, because you got to try to create some threat beyond the center backs or up the field. We've seen ABJ's speed and are just kind of like cutting tactical runs. It just felt like England was missing that. But I'm not so sure how much it would have helped, even though later, like you mentioned, Nas started to play better as they got into the second half. But then it turned out Serena Wiegman opted for Fran Kirby and Chloe Kelly, which I think probably when you put Chloe Kelly and her speed, her like smart runs, it seemed like I was kind of on the same page with my pal Serena. Obviously, I'm a big Chloe Kelly guy. She plays for Manchester City Football Club, scored a goal for England to win the Euros in 2022.
Let's go.
I'm nitpicking here. I think I would have liked to see ABJ.
I agree with you. I mean, Aggie's got the finishing from distance part of her game that I think could have made it a little bit tricky for the U.S. defenders, just kind of one extra thing to think about. And I think in a game like that, obviously ends 0-0, you could see somebody in a flash kind of getting something. Like, we talked about that Sears cross to Alyssa Thompson early. That's the kind of goal that gets scored in the first 5-6 minutes, and then you're in the 80th minute, it's still 1-0, because it's just like, oh yeah, like how do we let that one get by? And you mentioned the ABJ potential swap for Nas on the right. Emma Hayes, on the other hand, real quick aside, Emma Hayes and her extremely drippy black on black leather varsity jacket. Come on.
Fantastic. Yeah.
I mean, like if the lineup of Kruger, Sonnet, Fox, Girma, and Coffee didn't set the tone for what kind of day she was going to try to make it for England, that jacket,
yeah,
it was going to be, there was not going to be any scoring going on today. But back to it, Emma Hayes makes a change to start the second half, bringing on Yasmin Ryan for Emma Sears on that right-hand side. And I think my main takeaway is Yasmin has now elevated herself to borderline Sharpie status, because it wasn't like coming on in the 70th minute or the 75th minute where you're going at tired defenders and it's just like, okay, you're just feasting. This was like right at the start of the second half. Everybody was still relatively fresh, and she looked a gear faster. She looked more creative. Her runs were like super direct. She used her strength really well. She put a lot of pressure on that England defense. And you just kind of feel like if there was one other member of Triple Espresso to kind of finish one of those, crosses or just kind of possessions or sequences, game might have looked very, very different. But I thought Yasmin Ryan was probably one of my main takeaways is like, this is a player that is now firmly in the mix for the U.S. women's national team.
I think she has to be. I mean, definitely for 23-player squads moving forward. I mean, I know we talk about this a lot. It's just kind of a fact of professional sports. Lynn Williams, getting up there in age a little bit. You need somebody to kind of fill that fourth striker role, somebody you can put into the rotation. It seemed pretty obvious from as soon as Emma Hayes took the job that she had identified Yasmin Ryan as a player who could play in her system, and she's spot on with that. I mean, I remember being like a little surprised. I was like, oh yeah, I know Ryan's good for Gotham, but that's an interesting pickup. And
Same.
Who would have thought Emma Hayes, perhaps greater foresight than you or I when it comes to this football managing stuff. And the first 10 minutes out of the half, she was absolutely, unequivocally the best player on the field.
Yeah, super threatening. And it's made me rethink, because obviously you think about that Gotham team. When you think in NWSL, you're like, oh, they got so much talent. And so Yasmin Ryan doesn't usually get named in my own mind, like until like third or fourth or sometimes a little bit later, because they've got so many of these big name players, like household name type players. But then when you think back on those moments that Gotham had this season, so many moments,
she's
either powered by or, just like integral to those sequences. In my notes, I'm like, was you one of the more underrated players in the NWSL probably. But yeah, it turns out Emma Hayes, like you said, has properly rated Yasmin Ryan and her skill set.
Yeah, it would appear so. I did feel like after those 10 minutes where Ryan was just creating a lot of havoc, it felt like England was able to kind of snatch the game back, create some more chances. They were actually able to challenge Naeher a little bit, challenge the defense there. But again, that defense, it was stepping in front, it was getting blocks, it was, making sure nobody was really comfortable while they were shooting. The game started to kind of open up a little bit. It felt like as players got more comfortable. I talked about Chloe Kelly coming on. I thought she was all right. We can maybe talk a little more about the back and forth she had with Casey Kruger, where I feel pretty sure that Casey Kruger got the better of those exchanges.
10-9 round Kruger.
Yeah, I think so. But I did, speaking of subs though, I did feel like Fran Kirby changed the geometry a little bit. You talked about Jess Park. I thought Jess Park put in a good shift and had to work really, really hard. I think Jess Park working so hard was part of her being like, well, this Girma player is a lot, is like really good. Maybe not even better than she thought. I'm sure she has great respect for her. But I'm sure Jess Park was like, hey, yo, she's everywhere. Fran Kirby comes on. She's done it all, seen it all. She looked pretty good out there. But even with the open play, it felt like there was, I think the announcer, Wildman, even said it felt like there was a goal left in it when we were at like the 75th minute. And it did feel that way. But there was never nobody had like a clean enough look, or there wasn't like a spectacular moment of quality to kind of get across the line. And so we leave 0-0, share the spoils.
Yeah, totally agree with you. I thought, speaking of, was there not another goal in this match? I thought England looked just as likely, if not more likely, for roughly a 25-ish minute stretch in the second half, where I'm just like, okay, they might get it here.
Yeah.
I thought Alessia Russo really came on in the second half.
Yep.
Started to like really embrace the physicality of the match. It was like, no, I'm not going to draw a foul here. I'm going to like really get physical back. And, there was one play where she tried to split a double team on a ball where she probably didn't have a bunch of business winning, but she went after it 100%.
Yep.
And then I think from there, it was just like, this is just how I'm going to play.
Yeah. I don't know if we're talking about the exact same play, because I think she had tried it in a variety of ways. Just another example of Girma, though. There was a moment, might have been Walsh, who plays Russo forward, and she runs to get it. And Girma and Kruger just converge and just squeeze her out of it and just completely kill the chance. And I can't remember. It might have either been Walsh or Stanway. And you can see on the replay their face in the background. They just go, because they can just tell.
Yeah.
They're just like, damn it. They could just tell that Girma and Kruger have the perfect angle. They're not going to like bump into each other or do anything stupid. Mm-hmm. They just like, okay, yep. And now you don't have that space anymore. Now the attack's done.
Yeah. They literally like closed the door on the field. Yeah. Crazy. I jotted another one in my note. Jessica Naz had a really nice spin off of Girma, where, she kind of felt her on her back, spun to the left, runs onto the ball, and Girma just runs her down from behind.
Oh, yeah.
Kicks it away, nicks it away. The chance totally extinguished. And it was just like, oh my God, do you imagine she gets spun off of, left in the dust. Even when she gets beat, she still comes out on top. Just an unbelievable player. Not much more we can say about a player like that.
Can we throw out a basketball comp? I can't remember if we've used this before, but I know you're a fan of the great basketball podcaster and writer Zach Lowe. I always thought he had a funny line when he would talk about Kawhi Leonard, where Kawhi Leonard as a defender would just run up on the person with the ball and say, okay, I'm going to take this now. Thank you for your part in this exchange. It just feels like that's kind of how Naomi Girma operates herself. She just feels like she is so calm, just on the level throughout. And like you said, I think Russo spun off her. They were trying to play like a little bit of bully ball because Russo obviously has pretty good size. And they were doing that where she would have her back to Girma and then try to receive the ball and spin. And Girma's just like, oh, okay, you're going to try that? Then I'll just kind of cut off your angle. And now I'm taking the ball from you. Thank you very much. And I'll start distributing. It's just like your margin for error is tiny with her. And even then, you have a hell of a time coming up with any answers anytime you meet her at the ball.
Absolutely. The closest comp I could come up with is like prime Mariano Rivera. But it's just a wrap. I mean, we could just kind of play it out, but we already know how this one's going to end. Really great crowd in Wembley. The atmosphere was pretty live. I thought the production was really good. I haven't been the biggest fan of Wildman and Foudy as a pairing, but I thought they brought it really good information. Oh, yeah. Kind of felt like a World Cup level of production and, polish, to the whole thing. So really excited. And I'm excited for this next match. It's coming up against the Netherlands. I want to talk a little Alyssa Naeher.
Yes.
You mentioned her earlier. I know she had the retirement announcement earlier this week. We're not really sure if we've seen the last of Alyssa Naeher.
Yeah, I do think we were talking a little before we turned the microphones on. I mean, a little strange that they're not just saying like openly like Alyssa Naeher will start at The Hague against Netherlands, and that will be her final match. I was like waiting for them to say that. And then some of the post-match questions kind of like made it feel like a little bit like, yeah, playing here at Wembley, packed stadium, 80,000 people. I was just like, wait, was this the last one? Like, is anybody going to say this out loud? So I would hope that if that was really the last one, that they would have said something. So I guess I'll expect her to play against the Netherlands, and deservedly so. We'll run through it quickly. She's the backup goalkeeper for the 2015 world champion USA at the World Cup. At the 2019 World Cup, also won by the United States, if you remember, she allowed 3 goals across 7 matches. She won an Olympic gold medal in 2024, as I'm sure you recall. She won the CONCACAF W Gold Cup earlier this year. She was on the best 11 of that tournament. She won the CONCACAF Confederations Cup in 2018. From what I can tell, and we've lamented it many times, some of the records keeping on women's football leaves a little to be desired at times, but I believe she won the She Believes Cup 6 times. I want to go back to the 2019 World Cup real quick. A memory that sticks out to me, semifinal versus this England team. USA goes up. They're up 2-1. Everybody remembers the Alex Morgan tea celebration when she gets that second goal. Kristen Press scored the first goal on a great header. USA's up 2-1. On a breakaway, Becky Sauerbrunn fouls, I think it's Ellen White, in the box. Penalty. Concedes a penalty. We're in the 85th minute here. Manchester City legend, captain, Steph Houghton steps up to take the penalty. Alyssa Naeher saves it. Preserves the 2-1 lead. They obviously go on to win that semifinal. They go on to take on France in the final, a stacked French team in the final, beat them, win the World Cup. And now, I know we saw it later in the CONCACAF W Gold Cup. We saw it in the She Believes Cup earlier this year. She always came up with those big saves in those big moments. And it just turns out saving penalties is just another save for Alyssa Naeher. I just wanted to point out, in the pantheon of great saves, to make a save, to preserve a 2-1 lead in the dying embers of a semifinal, that's something that lives on forever, and it's absolutely crucial to them winning that 2019 World Cup.
Great career to look back on. I think when I think about Alyssa Naeher, I'm going to remember basically like her athleticism, her ability to, I was watching when I heard the announcement, I kind of went back and watched some Alyssa Naeher career highlights. And it was so funny how many times, obviously it's an Alyssa Naeher YouTube mixtape essentially, but so many times where I'm just like, oh, she's not getting that one. Oh, she got it. It's just like, nice. Every other clip, I'm just like, oh, wow. Okay. So her athleticism, obviously off the charts, instincts off the charts. But then all the intangibles, her intensity, her leadership, the fear factor she put into other teams, whether she was trying to defend a penalty kick or she was taking a penalty kick and she just unleashed, the thunder of a really unorthodox kind of like approach and strike, but was basically unstoppable, even on the other side of the penalty kick. Not to mention, she's the person that's just blocking all of your penalty kicks. So I think just mentally, she just had a way to really impose her will on the game. And then even when you think about, you mentioned those 2 World Cups that the U.S. won, you could even look at the 2023 World Cup. Obviously, the U.S. bounced in the quarters, not the result anyone was looking for. But across 4 matches, Alyssa Naeher gives up 1 goal. Like, you don't really expect the U.S. to lose that early in a tournament when you give up 1 goal in 4 matches. Obviously, props to Alyssa Naeher for that as well. But yeah, just an absolute legend, worthy of pretty much every good thing said about her.
Yeah, and we still get to watch her in the NWSL. I look forward to watching her continue to play for the Red Stars. They'll get Sam Staub back. You see what another season of Lauren Donaldson is able to do. Obviously, Mel Swanson, you already know what time it is. That'll be really interesting to see how Chicago kind of progresses. Yeah, and I was going back, and same as you, I'm going back and watching some of these highlights. In that penalty shootout, she saves penalties from Adriana Leon, Jordan Heidema, and Jessie Fleming all in a row, and then makes the penalty on her own. It's just like you said, deserving of every good thing that's ever said about her.
Yep, 100%. And hopefully we get to see her at least for a couple minutes or in some capacity here against the Netherlands in a couple days, but who knows? The U.S. Federation, they're an unpredictable bunch.
Can I make a prediction?
Yeah.
Let's say Emma Hayes, what if she does, you start her, let her play the first half, the first 5 minutes of the second half, and then you take her off and let everybody at the Hague kind of give standing ovation, get the props that way.
I like it.
That'll be my prediction. I think that'd be a cool way to go out.
Yeah, I kind of want. I definitely hope we get that moment. That would be really great. All right, man. 0-0 at Wembley. I don't think it delivered everything we were looking for, but it definitely delivered on a bunch of really interesting stuff. Anything else you want to hit before we get out of here?
If Lauren James played, we would have won that game. No, okay.
I mean, it's not that far off, man. I mean, to be honest, I think, especially because, and it's funny, you brought the basketball comp, but Jess Park going at Girma and Sonnet, like when an NFL team has like a massive nose tackle and all that person's supposed to do is just occupy the two, like the center and the guard, just that's kind of what they sent Jess Park out to do. Just like, go attract attention from Sonnet and Girma. Let's see if that opens things up. So put her in a tough spot. But I think, LJ in that spot. You think about Lauren Hemp, like you mentioned. Ella Toon doesn't play. Millie Bright doesn't play. could have been a different matchup. But I think I'll walk away thinking that these teams were pretty even. And even when you think about Triple Espresso, big name players. But I agree with your earlier point, man. I think Emma Hayes is building this from the back.
Yeah.
This is what she wants to do. Let's set up the fortress. Let's make it impossible. And we know that we have the talent and the skill and the quality up front to break through on pretty much anybody. They didn't get it done today, but I think there's enough talent where that's a pretty good bet if you're Emma Hayes.
Yeah, I think you're spot on, man. I mean, her track record speaks for itself. I think, she wants to make sure that she makes it virtually impossible for you to score. And then you kind of play forward from that. And then you have this like amoeba-like attack where you don't know what side it's coming from. Different players are playing to their strengths all over the field. So go ahead, everybody, yell at me in the comments. Well, if Triple Espresso would have played, we would have beat you 3-0. That's fine too. I stand by my story. I'm saying if Lauren James would have played in that match with no Triple Espresso, I think we would have won. How about that?
I like it. I'm interested to see what kind of comments we get off that. But before we get there, quick programming reminder, we will be back with a special Decemberfest episode, talking Germany with our guy, Peter Weiss. We're going to talk a little Bayern and Wolfsburg and their prospects in the UEFA Women's Champions League. We'll talk about Frauen Bundesliga, what the table's looking like there, the German national team as well. And then we will be back next week. Little match day 5 preview. Champions League returns December 11th and December 12th. We'll talk some machinations. We'll talk some key matchups. Check in on the big clubs. And with that said, all right, man, I think we did it. This has been another episode of Into the Channel. Sincere thank you for watching, listening, following, liking, subscribing, just plain hanging out with your boys. And remember to like if you liked, and subscribe or follow Into the Channel, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you like to watch or listen. Leave us a review over your favorite podcast app. Links to all of our socials in the show notes of this episode. And a big thank you to my co-host as well, Mr. Grand Angle, for being enemy for a day, but a bro for life outside of that. Really... Really appreciate you, man.
Likewise, buddy. Thank you for putting up with my nonsense. Look, man, I was 12 years old playing FIFA, and I was like, I'm going to root for England. I think that's where my ancestors came from. I mean, look at me. It's probably a pretty good bet. So thank you for putting up with my nonsense. Likewise to all our pals out there, thank you for putting up with it. Drop your comments in there. I'm a big boy. I can take it. And we will see you all next time.